Okay, we're going to give it a trick question here. What are likely to be the most influential interest groups in America for the remainder of the 2020s? I'm kind of curious what it'll put out here. Interest groups, also called advocacy groups or pressure groups or just lobbies, are organizations of people, ordinary people, with shared policy goals who enter the policy process at various points to try to achieve those goals. Unlike political parties that run candidates for office and organize, interest groups focus on influencing the policies enacted by government officials. The tendency for Americans to form groups to pursue their common interests was noted early by de Tocqueville, like I'd mentioned, who saw civic associations as fundamental to American democracy. Think groups of folks getting together to plant trees downtown or get a new library started, right? That kind of advocacy. Unlike political parties that run candidates for office, interest groups focus on influencing those policies by government officials. The right to organize is protected by the First Amendment's freedom of assembly and petition. Interest groups have proliferated over time, driven by factors like the diversity of American society. Things have changed economically, socially, ethnically. The complexity of government and the fragmentation of power provides openings to interest groups. Multiple access points now exist for influence within the policymaking process. Social movements are giving rise to formal organizations. More and more sort of niche issues have champions within the American public sector. And then there's reactions to government policies, groups that form to support or oppose specific actions. The more the government does, the more there is to sort of argue with or debate. Interest groups can arise. There's multiple types of interest groups. There's economic groups, by far the most numerous and best funded. They would include like the Chamber of Commerce, specific industry groups, labor unions, AFL-CIO, agricultural groups, and then professional organizations like the American Medical Association. There's public interest groups that claim to work for the public good, not for the interests of specific members. Examples would include some environmental groups like the Sierra Club, consumer protection groups, and good government groups like Common Cause. There's also single issue groups, which you might be familiar with, that focus intensely on one issue. So, like abortion, NARAL pro-choice, gun control, National Rifle Association, NRA, and then governmental units. State and local governments lobby the federal government for funding and if favorable policies, government lobbying itself for more money within the system. So, how do interest groups work? They employ various strategies to influence policy wherever they're entering from. They can lobby. So that's direct communication with government decision makers like legislators, bureaucrats, and staff. I had a lobbyist come speak to my American politics class when I was a freshman. His hair was just windswept back. He was always in a rush. He was constantly talking. He had sort of one specific purpose, just driving home that point, that issue, that cause. Lobbyists provide information, they draft legislation, they testify at hearings, and they build relationships. They play a really important role in getting legislation organized and then eventually voted upon. This is what people think of when they hear interest group. And they provide a lot to candidates in office or those in office specifically regarding the amount of work that needs to get done to be informed about specific issues. It's also electioneering, where folks are actively supporting candidates who favor their interests. This includes endorsing candidates, think the AARP endorsing a candidate, mobilizing voters to vote, contributing money through political action committees or PACs. So-called super PACs, enabled by the court decision Citizens United versus FEC, can raise and spend pretty much unlimited sums on independent expenditures not directly coordinated with campaigns. So if you support a specific issue and you are sort of registered with the lobbyists as you need to be by law, you can spend all of your money lobbying on specific issues as long as you're doing it with outside of the campaign framework. So it's the litigation. So you can interest groups use the courts to achieve policy goals either by filing lawsuits directly or submitting friend of the court briefs to cases trying to influence the decision, trying to sort of supply information to judges making decisions to make sure they're making an informed choice. No one has to actually listen to that advice, but making it available, people will pick up your work and take a look at it. And then there's going public, so appealing to public opinion through advertising, media campaigns, and mobilizing grassroots pressure on officials, getting anyone even outside of the network of the interest group to change their perspective on an issue can help make for fertile ground later to get your issue in front of greater public attention or up for a greater vote. Interest groups play a vital role in representing diverse interests across the United States, providing valuable information to policymakers. They are a key linkage mechanism in a pluralistic conception of what democracy is. However, their influence often raises significant concerns. Unequal resources is a concern. Wealthy groups and corporations often have far greater resources for lobbying and campaign contributions than public interest groups or groups representing the poor, for instance. There's also a revolving door problem. Former government officials often become very highly paid lobbyists or people that speak to lobbyists, raising concerns about potential favoritism based on past connections. So if you were just in Congress and you have a bunch of buddies still in Congress and you go work for K Street for a lobbyist firm, there's probably a period of time where you do have the ear of some members of Congress. Is that really, really fair that you're leveraging your turn in Congress to then influence Congress after the fact? Also, iron triangles and issue networks that we've discussed previously. Stable relationships between interest groups, congressional committees, and bureaucratic agencies can lead to policies benefiting insiders at the public expense. Only those who sort of deeply understand the issue are close enough to know that if you write it this certain way, there's going to be certain winners and losers when it comes to companies, stocks, that kind of thing. Transparency and accountability is also a concern. While lobbying activities are regulated to some extent, tracking the full extent of interest group influence can be difficult. You're supposed to be registered with the federal government. If you're caught not doing those things, it's a significant issue, but who's watching the watchers is sort of the concern here. Um, the role that churches, schools, and communities and other mediating organizations play in preserving civil society is also significant. These institutions, often overlapping with interest groups or acting as sources of political socialization, foster social connections, transmit values, provide platforms for discussion, and can mobilize collective action, often sort of in response to lobbying, in response to what the world is saying and what the story is. Your local community kind of tells a different story sometimes. They form the very fabric of civil society that Tocqueville saw as essential for resisting both government tyranny and excessive individualism. A strong civil society composed of diverse voluntary associations, interest groups, and just community groups is seen as crucial for America's democratic health.